Do you want to sound more exotic and bring more out of your guitar solo? Then check out today's video where we are going to talk about symmetrical scales and how to use them in modern metal playing. Hey Guitar Champion, what's going on? I'm Hombach, back from my practice cave, and welcome to today's video. Here we go. So last week I was on tour as a substitute lead guitar player for the death metal band Corbian. We were the supporting act of the great metal band called Avatar, which I really highly recommend to check out. Really crazy guys, really cool lead guitar players. Awesome, love these boys. And in their set list there are not too many solo. I'd sneak in one or two solos here and there, but especially there's one song where in the end not really much is happening. One guitar is just playing something like some chunking stuff, and the other one is just playing some octaves and stuff. And I thought, okay, hey, can I do a solo over this section? They said, of course, go ahead. And then I wrote one day before the first show this solo here. And in the solo I experimented a lot with some symmetrical scales, which makes your playing sound a lot more kind of fusion-esque, a lot of more exotic, but it's not so easy to use symmetrical scales because they have a certain sound to it. So you need a few tricks here and there to know when to use those symmetrical scales, and I thought, why not doing a video about this? And today in this video I'm going to show you how to use symmetrical scales in your next metal solo. First we're going to check out all kinds of symmetrical scales to first define what they are. And then I'm going to talk about the approach, how you can use those scales and some tips and some tricks here. And after that I'm going to analyze it with the solo that I wrote and how I used it there. Alright, you can find today's files and tabs in the description box. There's a link where you can download them. And without further ado, I would say let's start with chapter number 1. Okay, symmetrical scales. I would say the most famous symmetrical scale is the so-called whole tone scale, which only consists out of whole tones. So the E whole tone scale, for example, goes like this. Starting on the E and then moving up just a whole tone. It only consists out of 6 notes, and therefore it is called a hexatonic scale. A regular scale is called a heptatonic scale because it consists out of 7 notes. And then of course you definitely know the pentatonic scale, which consists out of 5 notes. And the whole tone scale is a hexatonic scale. The first thing that I always want to know when I'm going to learn a new scale or a new sound is what kind of intervals do we have here, because as I'm always saying, the intervals are the Lego bricks of music. Those are our foundations. We really have to be aware of the intervals. So in the whole tone scale we have the root, the second, major third, sharp 11th, augmented 5th and the minor 7th. Because we only have 6 notes, the correct term for the last note, which would be note number 6, so it has to be something with an interval of 6, would be not the minor 7, it would be the augmented 6th. But it's a little bit easier to say minor 7 because then we instantly know over which kind of chord we can play the whole tone scale. Like for example E dominant 7 sharp 11 or E dominant 7 with the augmented 5th in it, those kind of jazzy chords, we can play the augmented scale of it. But we can also play it over the regular E dominant 7 because we have all the notes from the E dominant 7 chord, E, G sharp, B, there goes my pick, and D inside of the E whole tone scale. So next time you came across an E dominant 7, try out the whole tone scale. Okay, now let's talk about the fingering. There's an easy 3-note per string fingering. But the problem with this is it's really diagonal and not really vertical, and we have a big jump going from the G to the B string due to our tuning. And there's also kind of a caged fingering which goes like this. Or starting from the E string. Again, you will find the tabs for all those kind of scales in the description box. Okay, next we have the diminished scale. The diminished scale consists only out of half tones and whole tones. And therefore we create, or we can get, two modes, which is called half tone whole tone scale or whole tone half tone scale. And it's always switching. Whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone. Or half tone, whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone, whole tone. Depends on where you're starting. The diminished scale is, compared to the whole tone scale, an octatonic scale, which means we have 8 notes in it. In an E half tone whole tone we have those notes. Speaking in intervals, we have the flat 9, the major 9 or the minor third, the major third, the sharp 11, regular fifths, major 6, dominant 7, root. And in the whole tone half tone scale we have those notes. Regular 9, minor third, fourth, diminished fifths, minor 6, diminished 7, major 7, going to the octave. I love those two scales, and I try to use them every time when I'm writing a kind of modern metal kind of solo, because you instantly sound like Alan Holdsworth. And who will not sound like the godfather of metal, jazz, soloing, fusion, crazy kind of stuff, Alan Holdsworth? But there's of course a little bit more inside, and we're going to take a look at this. First off, the fingerings. So the fingering for the half tone whole tone scale is, or the whole tone half tone scale, is actually pretty easy because we only have 2 shapes. We only have this shape here, half tone, whole tone, or this shape here, whole tone, half tone, when we're speaking in 3-note per string. Now first I start on the E string. It's a little bit easier to recognize this with starting on the E string, and again here this one is a 7th string, the beautiful Ibanez Quest 7th string, so don't be confused by this. This is my E string. First, a half tone whole tone scale looks like this. And the whole tone half tone looks like this. So those are the 2 3-note per string fingerings. We're going to take a little bit more about this scale when we're talking about the approaches, but this scale is mwah! Everyone should check out the half tone, whole tone, half tone, diminished scales. Alright, and next we have the augmented scale, and the augmented scale is minor third and then half tone, and then minor third, half tone, minor third, half tone, minor third. So it's a 6-note scale, and it goes like this. The augmented scale comes from taking 3 major chords in the distant of a major third. So we have E major, E, G sharp and B, A flat major, or G sharp, but it's a little bit easier to name it A flat. A flat major, which is A flat, C and E flat, and then we have C major, which is C, E and G, and going from C major 1 major third higher we are again in E major, so the circle ends. And interval speaking, this is really interesting. We have our root note, the minor third, the major third, or you could call this one the sharp 9, and the major third, and then we are going to the fifths, then the augmented fifths, and the major 7. So this is going to be really interesting when we're taking a deeper look into how to approach this kind of scale. because there we are talking a lot about arpeggios. But first, let us check out a cool fingering for the augmented scale. So the 3-note per string shape of the E augmented scale goes like this. But this fingering is not really usable. Again, we have a finger shape that is really diagonal, and we have that big jump between the G and the B string, and we cannot really play with intervals here, not the intervals that we have learned from our cage system. And this is why I prefer a vertical finger shape. And here I have this vertical finger shape for the E augmented scale. Again. And here we can clearly see our intervals that we have and that we have learned from our cage system, starting with the E as our root note. Due to all the halftone steps and going to the minor third, to the major third and all that kind of stuff, this kind of scale has a reminiscence of sounding Arabic. And it kind of reminds me of a version of Phrygian dominant or something like that, or a Neapolitan harmonic whatnot minor. But we can change the sound a lot when we are taking a different approach on the scale. And this leads us to the next chapter, chapter number 2, which is approaches. Here we go. Okay, first we're going to take a step back to the whole tone scale. And it's really interesting, what kind of arpeggios do we get out of a scale? And here in the whole tone scale, I have to correct myself from a few minutes ago that I've said that we can play the E whole tone scale over E dominant 7 chord, which is not really correctly it's correctly when we are leaving out the fifths. We don't have the B in the E whole tone scale, we have the B flat and the C. When we're leaving out the fifths, we can play the E whole tone scale. So sorry about that, I have to correct myself. Stupid Justin. Alright, but what kind of arpeggios do we get out of the E whole tone scale? We can get as triads, E augmented, E augmented 7, which has a really awesome sound to it. Really love that kind of sound. We get E dominant with a sharp 11, which also has a really awesome sound. Sorry, this was the correct one. Instantly you sound like some sort of fusion god which plays over some cool metal stuff. What I love about the whole tone scale is, especially about all these symmetrical scales, that we can create a certain tension, and a tension that never got really released. You know, in all the other scales, like for example the Phrygian dominant scale, it resolves to a note, it will lead us to a note. But here in the whole tone scale, and as well in the two other scales, it's kind of a tension that will never get released, that is always repeating. And I love this shape, I love this sound. It will continue forever. But of course you can take the scale and shred with it, especially in the 3-note per string kind of position. You can take all those kind of alternate picking runs that you know, the Paul Gilbert lick, the Pepsi lick, which is kind of tricky, and all those kind of lick you can attempt to the whole tone scale, of course, as well. If you want to get more kind of this Alan Holdsworth sound, then use legato hammer-ons only, no pull-offs, only hammer-ons. A lot of hammer-ons from nowhere. See, I never use my right hand, I only use it for muting purpose. Something like this. And if you want to have a little bit more kind of Petrucci-esque, Petrucci is using the whole tone scale a lot and play with alternate picking. Guthrie Govan as well, Jason Becker, Jeff Loomis, all those guys are a big fan of the whole tone scale. Speaking of Jeff Loomis is also a big fan of the diminished scale, and there we can take a lot out of it. For example, a really nice cool trick that we can use in our diminished scale. First of all, of course we can use in the diminished scale the diminished chord. And the cool thing about the diminished scale is that we can use it like this. We have a diminished chord and half step below our root note. So we have diminished chord, half step going on half step, diminished chord, then going on to the next minor third inversion of the first diminished chord, and then moving on in half step again. So again, half tone, whole tone, we can put on every note a diminished chord, which is really, really awesome. And even Yngwie knew that. Listen to the intro of his video, mid-90s, late 90s, early 2000 kind of lesson video, where he is playing Arpeggios from Hell. He starts this song with a sweep arpeggios section, which goes something like this. And of course you can use, like in the whole tone scale, the diminished scale, all the shapes from the 3 note per strings kind of fingerings that we have here, which we have easily due to the nature of the octatonic scale into a vertical kind of position. You can use all cool kind of shred licks to create a really, really cool tension. And this is the cool thing about the diminished scale. We can create a lot of tension. I mean, especially all the diminished chords that we know from the Yngwie intro, all those crawling, creeping, diminished. It creates such a cool, nasty kind of tension, and I love this. A good example for it would be the instrumental from Octavarium from Dream Theater, which is played in the, there's this long kind of run, which is played in the half tone, whole tone scale. It goes something like, do I remember this correctly? Something like that. You will recognize this when you know the song. And then another way is, like I've mentioned it in the whole tone scale, is to play it with a little bit of legato, maybe with an interesting subdivision like triplets. A 4-note phrase, 4-note sequence, but played with triplets. Like this one here that I've used in the solo as well. Instantly you will sound like Alan Holdsworth or whatnot, of kind of crazy fusion-esque guy. So there's a lot you can take out of the whole tone, half tone, whole tone, half tone scale. I love to use this kind of scale over Phrygian riffs. In my band Eternity's End, there's a single Hounds of Tindalos, and there in the intro of my solo I used a half tone, whole tone scale over a Phrygian kind of riff. Sounds like this. This is a lick with a Swibrid technique. I made a video about this here in this link. Click the info card. There you can check out this lesson. And yeah, in the riff, in the main riff, we only have the flat 9 and the minor 7, which means there is no note that can, crash or interference, what a crazy word, crash with the notes from the whole tone, half tone, whole tone, diminished kind of scale. So every time when you have kind of a Phrygian riff underneath your solo, try to experiment a little bit with the half tone, whole tone scale, especially with those cool arpeggios that you can shift a half tone up and then a whole tone up and so on to create this creepy kind of sound. Really worth to check out. Alright, let's go to the augmented scale. As I've said, in the augmented scale we can change the sound from the scale a lot. When we are playing the scale like this, it sounds kind of Arabic, right? But we can take this scale in a different approach. As I've mentioned, the whole tone scale is the concept of the whole tone scale comes from taking 3 major chords, E major, G sharp major, and C major. And therefore we can also play with those arpeggios. We can combine those arpeggios, for example, I'm playing E major arpeggio, going to C major arpeggio, going to G major arpeggio. Creating, for example, sweep lines like this. And here I took just simply E major, going to C major, sorry, going to G sharp major, sorry, A flat major, and again E major. Just combining those kind of major triads creates immediately a really interesting sound. But we can also go a little bit deeper inside of it. Instead of playing the major triads, we can play augmented triads. The cool thing now about the augmented triads that we have, like in the diminished scale, we have a diminished chord and then half tone next to it, another diminished chord, and then moving on through the scale. Here we have it with augmented chords. So we have E flat augmented going to E augmented, G augmented going to G sharp augmented, and B augmented going to C augmented. And this instantly reminds me of, I don't know, Star Wars, Naboo, when Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan is swimming to the Gungan kind of city. Really awesome sound has it to it. And we can use this as well in our soloing by adding this one to arpeggios. Playing around with some augmented arpeggios. Or going to the seventh kind of arpeggios, where we have a major 7 augmented sound, which sounds something like this. The next cool thing is that we can take those E major 7 augmented 5 arpeggios and we can shift them through the scale. For example, we can not only play them in E, we could also play them in G or in C. You can also take some more notes from the scale. For example, I created this kind of interesting arpeggio. And here, I will demonstrate this in E. We have, coming from the augmented scale, the sharp 9, the G, which is also the minor third. It's not so easy to name the things correctly inside of this, in those symmetrical octatonic and heptatonic scale. So basically it's the minor third, the major third going to the root note, the minor 6 and the fifths, or the augmented 5 and the fifths, and going then back to the minor third. Thus you can also play really cool in quintuplets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you can shift it again, as I've mentioned, to the major scales. Or for example here. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can take out of the augmented scale. Now let me show you how I did this in this solo that I wrote for the band Corbian. Alright, first the background is really important, because the background is only consists out of 2 things, and live just one thing. Well, it is actually, well, the songs are in C standard, but I'm here in a standard tuned guitar, so I demonstrate this kind of solo, those ideas in the standard tuned guitar. And basically what we have in the rhythm guitar is this kind of heavy rhythm on the low C, and on top of that in the recording is this kind of melody. For me it was important during writing that solo that I take also this kind of melody and transfer it into the solo, but still shred the hell out of it with my symmetrical scales, because I have the freedom to play all scales that I want, because the rhythm guitar is only on the bass is only playing the C. So I could basically play the C major scale over it. I could play something like this over it. I could play the minor scale, I could play the blues scale. There wouldn't be something wrong or off, because there are no notes which can clash with the backing guitar. So yeah, therefore I take my freedom to play around with some of these symmetrical scales. I start off with imitating the melody, this kind of idea. Then I play a half tone whole tone run, and after that I again play some bending melody, and then I take those groupings of 4 played in triplets in the half tone whole tone scale. to create this Allen Holdsworth, Raphael Trujillo kind of sound. Then I go to the augmented scale. The as I mentioned, it's in C standard, so I was thinking D augmented here, and then I took this kind of tapping idea. Sorry for some of the noises, I don't have my groove gear right now on this guitar, which is really heavily inspired from Justin McKinley from the Faceless, where I'm playing those 4-note sequences over the augmented major 7 augmented arpeggio, D major 7 augmented. So I have root, minor third, augmented fifth, major 7, then starting on the major third, augmented fifth, major 7, root, then starting on that augmented fifth, oh god damn it, fifth, major third, major 7, root, major third, and so on. Ah, god damn it. All those sharps and flats and major and augmented and Then I took this arpeggio, this sweep arpeggio, this quintuplet sweep arpeggio, which I played a few minutes ago, and then shifted again through the major thirds, resolving it a little bit in the D major kind of arpeggio, because there where everything is coming from. Again, the song is in the guitar is in C standard. C standard, it's also called D, blah 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 blah. You know what I mean when you know how to play deathcore, which is basically everything is in D, but a whole tone tuned down. Okay, so I resolving to D major, going back to the imitating the melody, and then I took the half tone whole tone scale and create some alternate picking, Paul Gilbert licks, to create a little bit kind of tension with the half tone whole tone scale to get to the highest note, to the big finale, to releasing the solo. Something like that. And then I'm going to play the same melody like they did in the rhythm guitar, which is a descending melody which resolves back to our root note. So those are basically some examples how you can use the symmetrical scale in your solo playing. It's really important to know when to use tension. This is really important. I here again still try to imitate the melody and to get to the melody that is played underneath that solo in the recording, and still have to, and still have the right build up and all this kind of stuff. But you can really use the symmetrical scales like the diminished scale, like the whole tone scale, like the augmented scale, to create some really cool and interesting sounds, especially over that kind of music, because this kind of modern metal music is really kind of strange sounding with a lot of tension by itself. So you have the freedom to use the half tone whole tone scale or the augmented scale. Maybe it's not so good to use a scale in a kind of a funk situation or a pop situation. When Taylor Swift would tell me that I have to write a solo, I would probably not use the half tone whole tone scale. Well, maybe for one lick or so to create some sort of tension, like a run to a note. Maybe like that you can use the half tone whole tone scale. But in this music it fits really, really well. So try out some of the concept that I've told you today. There's of course a lot more that you can learn about all those kind of symmetrical scales. I hope you liked this video. I hope I'm going to see you in my next video. So far, cheers and stay progress.